Hello, everybody, and this is a new episode of Analytics Mindset. I know I've been out for a bit, but here we are, and we're back and better than ever. This video is going to be around the Model Context Protocol, advanced topics. There is a lot. There is a lot of stuff happening around in this course, and I just completed it not so long ago. I will go very high level on this. It is designed for sure if you are going to be maintaining an actual server. Some of this may not be applicable, but at least in my opinion, it's a nice certificate to have and just learn more about Gen AI in general and MCP particularly, as it is a very novel topic. But yeah, as with other courses, this is free. It's offered by Anthropic, and you can just go here and look and enroll by yourself. And as you can see, you will get the fancy certificate once you're done. Now, there is a lot of things happening in this course. Again, I will go high level. I would really recommend you to set up an MCP server if you are interested in it. If not, it's fine. It's just for awareness. But it will also help you understand more how AI works, and particularly if you are in the user side of things, how to use MCP servers, how to connect to MCP servers, and some considerations that you may want to have. Well, I know we have been going through a lot of more AI vulnerabilities, prompt injection, and all of these other things. That just helps on these regards. But the core of this course is about how do you integrate AI models, notification systems, how do you let your client say, hey, my actual skill is going through this. I am, the example they use here is an anthropology research. How is this research going? What steps am I doing here? And you may have seen that. Some models actually have that already and they use the same concept. They will take stuff and say, I am 20% done. I am doing these reasoning steps. As agentic AI and more deep reasoning models have become more and more popular, it is better to at least give the user a perspective. This is the step that we're in right now. Sampling is a lot about where the language model does the call, the client, and also the shifts of AI costs, because AI costs are becoming more and more important as we go on. Root-based file access, I found it very interesting. It basically means that you are giving AI the actual ask on, hey, these are the files that you can access, both in the client side and in the server side. In the client side, think about it this way: convert this MP4 to another format or an MP3 because you just want the audio. You need to let Claude in this case know that you need to access the MCP server, needs to access not your local client, but the MCP server, needs to access these specific files and directories. Now, there is a lot of talking going around, and keep in mind, this is my personal opinion, but it is July 26th and subject to change. AI is for sure becoming an increasingly important topic in security talks, system security, corporate security, governance, you call it. It is a lot about how do we actually secure AI, because obviously if you give it access to everything, and it's also it is not a deterministic system. You can still prompt inject the AI. It can still bypass things, all of those fancy and bad things that you don't want to happen to you. Let's say you feed AI with your password for your bank account, and then somebody asks, hey, what's this person's password? It may say, I don't know it, or I cannot answer this question. But at some point, it may actually just be, here you go. This is the password. Have fun. And then you're screwed, basically. Those are conversations that are happening right now in the industry. Plenty of literature is being written on that right now. Interesting topic if you want to go more into that. But Anthropic solution for Cloud is root-based file access. You are granting the MCP server an access to specific directory and only that directory. You're isolating it from the rest of the files in your computer. JSON. JSON is a human readable message architecture. It's supposed to be easy to read by humans, and you can actually read it by yourself if you have seen it with the brackets and all of those fancy things and disclaimers. We will see examples later on. Studio transpose mechanism is also something else that they touch, but again, I want to go into streamable HTTP that much because it is more if you are trying to implement it by yourself. But again, if you actually do need to do that, feel free to. And transport mechanism. This goes a lot into HTTP and why it has some limitations. But yeah, plenty of experience with Python. You need at least reading Python when you need to do programming patterns. You need to be familiar with JSON at least. But again, it's not a complicated course, and we will just go really quickly through most of it. As I was saying before, I won't cover this in detail. That's why the course exists. And honestly, this is one of those more less theory, more practical courses if you're maintaining MCP servers. I am not, but something. You want to use something to get through information from Wikipedia, and you need to summarize it into a report. As you can see here, you can give the MCP server access to Cloud. This is interesting because the MCP server by itself doesn't have access to Cloud. You need to give access by yourself with their own API key and all the authentication. If you have ever set up for an AI model to connect through the API, it's very different than a chatbot because in the chatbot side, you're already authenticated, you have an account. But when you're trying to do it programmatically, you need an API. You're going to need your API key, you generate another API, and that's something that's going to come up later. But what something says is that the server generates a prompt and then it gets to the client and the client calls Claude. The client has already a connection with Claude, so it will make the return. You can see here their infrastructure. And that's what sampling does pretty much. It does shift the costs to the client instead of the server. And again, you will reduce the server complexity because you don't need another API key. You're just using whatever your client has. And you can see here the implementation of sampling. It's already in the library. And you need to do it both in the server and client side. That's something important to know. All of this is through a server. You're doing server client handshake, and that's gonna come up later. Login and push notification. As I mentioned before, you want to always tell your customer, especially with things that take time, what's happening. You don't want, you're this one of progress, right? All of us like that. Let's say I am busy and I have this deep research that I'm doing, and Cloud says estimated time is 3 hours. It may take one, it may take 6, but at least having some steps or having some progress notifications will help me address that. Do I need to leave my computer on? Do I need to just have the server running somewhere? Or do I just need to wait until that happens? It makes everybody's life easier when you have login and progress notifications for your customers instead of them trying to figure out how much time they have left before that long running operation is done. And this is not an issue in 5 to 10 seconds. That's why you have these logging symbols in your screen sometimes when you open an app or things like that. But when it's more than 10 minutes, we as humans just appreciate always having some update on what's happening. Again, researching a topic is something that Anthropic puts here, or processing data. You could actually just do machine learning models. You could have very big models. That's something else. And you can also get real-time feedback on what's happening behind the scenes. Again, if you have used reasoning models, you have seen an implementation on this when they will tell you, hey, I'm doing this. Or let's say you want to do a budget with an AI model and you ask ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, I need you to take these numbers and then reason through people with a similar income level than mine and similar situation. What are the best ways that I can save more money at the end of the month? And yes, to make it more complex, also calculate all of that through formulas and you take into account inflation through the next 5 years. then the model will need to call some tools. It will need to look into those tools. It will need to probably write some Python scripts, probably, if it needs something like that. Do the math behind it and use some formulas. That's going to take some time. But as I said before, we are not going that much into detail on that. You can see here that the context objects is your methods to communicate, and you just need to call the MCP tool. They're using research, and you're researching a topic. And then this is the await part where you are asking about the research, where are we in the research topic, and then when the model actually goes into writing the report, that's very different because you were first just researching about it. But now you can tell your customer, I am writing the report. I took all the information that I had before, but now I just need to write it. And you will also need to set it up on the client side as we talked before. But up to your client application, how you present it to the user. But part of it is just how you take it from the server sends it, and then the client needs to actually see it and show it. And you have implementations. I like those little implementations. It tells you what the code is and how it works. And I won't go that much into roots, but um, your MCP server will do, as it says, a video conversion. It actually uses MP4 to move format, and the user asks Claude convert Viking MP4 to move. Then Claude doesn't know where it is. It will just call the file name, but you don't have the whole file. It is also a way for roots to tell you how can you actually say this is a specific file that I have. This is the list roots and the read the directory that you can use. But again, it's supposed to be more for security and boundaries. But again, we all know AI models are prone to errors. Sometimes they can error out, and sometimes they will just do things that they are not supposed to do. But it's a key benefit because it's user friendly. The other option will be you need to provide full file paths, and let's be honest, nobody here likes full file paths. We like to provide a file and say, do this instead of this file is in this virtual directory on Windows, on the documents, on this subfolder, on this other subfolder. And even if Windows has made it easier later on, it's still very annoying to just provide you the full file path. And that's the first part. The first part is core MCP features. Now, transpose and communications. I will go really quickly through most of these. There is multiple ways that you can use different protocols to transfer stuff through for MCP, but MCP works in JSON. Now, JSON, as you can see here, it's a format. If you have never seen JSON, I will just walk you through really quickly through it. JSON is supposed to be very easy to understand to humans. It is readable. I find it annoying sometimes, but it has a structure, right? You have ID equals 1, method tools/call. You are declaring to something. This is, if you want to think of more traditional programming concepts, you have your variable and you have your value for the variable. Not exactly the same because JSON allows you to actually nest variables or nest different things. And it also allows you to do fancy brackets like this. But you can just call a tool request. It's building a message in this case. This JSON message has all the information that the server will need. There is a lot of message types that you can do it's in GitHub. There are a lot of categories. I'm just going to show you here all the messages that you can have. The magic of MCP, as we explored in the previous video on MCP, is you already have all this implemented through an API, but you have the flexibility to do it in your own environment as well. And you can do the notification messages as we talked about. But again, this is a little bit more complicated. I will not go that much into detail. On Studio is a lot when you're first developing an MCP server, you will need to have it in your own server in the same physical computer. This only works, and you can see here there's std in and std out. You just do client sends message to server and server sends message to client. But yeah, you can just run your server in your terminal, and you can also have a separate client, but they need to be in the same computer. And it's good for testing. It's good for just having a small server if you're testing environments locally. And there you go. With any transport, you need to handle 4 different communication patterns. This is all I'm gonna leave you with. There is a lot more, but for this video, initial request from the client to the server, then you get a response from the server, goes to the client. You need another initial request from the server to the client, and then the response from the client to the server. That's the beauty of this transport protocol, is its simplicity, that you can initiate communication anytime using the 2 channels. But it is ideal. Anthropic is obsessed, and it's just the baseline for what to tackle when you use a lot of transport methods that are a lot more complicated. Streamable HTTP, it's something that you can use through the HTTP connection. But in this transport, as it says here, the standard I/O a transport requires both the client and the server to be in the same machine. As you can imagine, that has a ton of limitations because we work with the internet and we live in a world where cloud computing is everywhere. This specific transport opens up a lot of possibilities for public MCP servers, and that's where most likely most of your servers, if you interact with some, or behind the scenes, maybe you don't by yourself, but your company or your employer has an actual MCP server that their custom AI uses. That's becoming more and more common. Schools are doing that too, but it's transparent to you because you actually don't see that happening. There you go. There's 2 things that happen here. You have the stateless HTTP controls connection state management, and the JSON response that controls the response handling. These are false by default because they have some considerations and they actually break out of features from MCP that might change in the future. MCP is a very young tool and it may change. But you can see here that the key takeaway is HTTP really constrains these communication challenges because the server is hosting a known URL and then the server can easily respond to this request. But yeah, you have server initiated requests, create message requests, and list root requests and notifications are very difficult to implement with HTTP. And that's what happens when you take that break and you have the streamable HTTP solution instead. There is other kinds of solutions. I will already highlight through the rest of the course. You have streamable HTTP in a lot of detail, but I just want you to get from here, you get initialize request, then initialize the result, and then initialize the notification back. And you need an MCP session ID for that. You need an actual ID that will come back. You can also use SSE workaround for that. Message routing. But these 2 are going to be your most important blockers, stateless HTTP and JSON responses, because they can break even ACC, the actual change that you're trying to do. And it's more complex than other MCP transports, but again, it allows you to use the internet to connect. Now, the last part I want to leave you with is load balancing. Big important part is like, okay, so if I have stateless HTTP and JSON response flags and I set them to true and they break my server, why I can just not do false all the time? Because you need to scale. If you have a local / personal MCP server, that's not an issue. But in most scaling computing, you are going to need a load balancer. That's how it will usually work at. You cannot do it like this. You have one MCP server and multiple clients. Usually you will have a load balancer here. the thing is, when you do that, the things get very complicated because the get SSC response doesn't go through the load balancing. Or they may go to a different server, and if your tool has sampling through Claude, then you can generate one and you can try to match the responses ID, but you're not going to get an actual response there. So stateless HTTP true eliminates the coordination problem, but you don't get a session ID. Your clients may go to different things in the actual load balancing. You don't need to do client initialization though. Clients can make requests without the whole handshake that we saw before. So again, it is just interesting trade-off that you have there, and you have here the main trade-offs here. Stateless HTTP will allow you to use horizontal scaling, and again, unless you are the only one using it, you're gonna need that. You don't need a server to client communication. Your tools don't require a model sampling. It is a trade-off. We cannot have both of them yet anyway, maybe in the future. But you can only have one or the other, and that's more of an HTTP limitation than AI limitation, but it's good to know how tools not necessarily talk to each other, unlike each other, to the way that we would thought. And you want to minimize connection overhead. JSON response is a little bit easier. You don't need streaming responses. You prefer simple, non-streaming HTTP responses, and you're integrating with systems that just expect a plain JSON. Sometimes just plain JSON is enough. But yeah, it says here that in production, you usually will need these two. And if you're testing locally with standard IO, the STDO we just talked about before, this is fine. But for production, the behavior is going to be very different, especially on what you're going to do. And the last part of this course is just a test that you're going to get. I'm not going to show the responses, but yeah, that is pretty much it. And as always, thank you for watching. And if you have any suggestions or you want to drop me a like, feel free. Thank you. Bye bye.